write down your processes. That's the first tip. And you don't even have to have an objective, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You may think you know what you're doing and you think you know your process, but until you're able to write it down and look at it outside of your head, there's a tremendous amount of insight that you'll generate from doing the exercise. So before you try to scale, before you try to buy that next tool, before you try to hire that next person, write down your processes. I guarantee it will be fruitful exercise no matter what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. We're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life. Want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around.
In this episode, I get to speak with Samuel Drauschak. He's a seasoned expert in business process improvement and innovation, as he shares insights into the fascinating world of process science. From childhood fascination with simulations in video games to navigating the complexities of entrepreneurship, our guest takes us on a journey through the principles of maximizing productivity and efficiency in business. Learn practical tips and case studies that can help you streamline your processes and achieve greater success in your ventures. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind maximizing efficiency, productivity, and success in business. Stay tuned.
Sam, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey man, so what I love is that you're not just a trailblazer, but you have been doing business process improvement and innovation for so many years that you're now a chief scientist, process scientist over at Truefit. How did you get here and what inspired you to say, hey, I want to go in this path, in this field? Let's take a walk down memory lane and retrace those steps.
Sure. And how far do you think? You want to go all the way back to the beginning, schooling years?
It's up to you. What inspired you to say, hey, this is a place that I want to be in so that I can help more people in making sure that their processes are aligned, and that's where you're going and taking people?
Sure. So for me, and I think this is similar with a lot of people who could say they're really passionate about something, this particular subject matter, process science, it just really speaks to me in terms of being extremely interesting, engaging, and I just love working on it. I love teaching it. I love studying it. And if you go all the way back down memory lane, so to speak, I think this has always been something from early on in my childhood, playing video games that were more process oriented, to then going on to college and studying science, where I learned about biological processes, chemical processes. There's a fundamental aspect of studying and talking about process that's always fascinated me in whatever context it's been in. So after my schooling, I decided not to go into the natural sciences directly, but I went into an engineering firm initially where I was introduced formally to process engineering. And I started to understand that process was a very small discipline, but it was a standard school of knowledge in business where you had Lean from Toyota, you had Six Sigma, which was here in the United States from Motorola. There was these robust bodies of knowledge around process. And I just continued to dig and dig, and I just fell in love with the subject matter. And the short story, and I'm happy to give any more details you'd like.
Sure.
Going back to school to study process and operations, to doing consulting with big consultancies, consulting on my own, I just stayed with this process thing for my entire career. And it's just been extremely enriching, either studying new material on the edges, helping clients really discover new things in our digital world. Process has always just been something I find endlessly fascinating, and I'm still very passionate about it to this day.
Man, that's really interesting how you saw processes in games and in processes and the different things that you're involved in. You was like, this is really powerful, and I want to go deeper into it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about just the commonalities between games and work, and yeah. So a lot of games, even back when I was a kid, where games weren't as sophisticated, there's this idea of sophistication, or not sophistication, there was simulation is what I was trying to say. So there's these simulation games, the original Sim Cities, these builders where you have resources, and games that were really challenging you to create a sustainable process. That was the way you won these games, which is you have limited resources. You're either trying to build a city, even build a family, get to the goal, whatever it is. It was this challenge of, having a limited amount of scope and having to be efficient to succeed. And that's a theme in some games, and those are the games that I gravitated towards. And when you get into real life, there's nothing, the parallels are everywhere. When you talk about science and nature, all of our lives are based on these same principles, which is there's finite resources, there's scarcity. We have to improve our processes if we want to become more efficient and to survive, one, but even past surviving, thrive, which is if I have limited resources, how do I make the most of them? And you could talk about that being personal productivity. And then in the business setting, it's not that much different. Companies every day, and they don't call it process work, but they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to take a set of scarce resources and they're trying to put it through more and more efficient processes so that they can sustain and scale a successful company. So the parallels are everywhere, right? Between the games that we enjoy playing, the natural models that we watch and that we study, the businesses we build, there's always this fundamental layer of how do we build a better process? How do we get more from less resources? And that's really the similarities I'm speaking to.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's so powerful because the more efficient you are, the more good you're doing for not just the world, but also bringing the maximum efficiency from every single process or every single resource that is involved in it. Now, how does that, for example, in entrepreneurship, we want to maximize our time depending on how we only have 24 hours. And that's what everybody, every single person says. Hey, we only have 24 hours. How you utilize those 24 hours is different from one person to the other person because of the processes, the systems, the things that they want to be accomplished, the goals that they have set up comes to mind. So discuss some of those case studies that or examples that could provide practical insights for, let's say, an entrepreneur starting up.
Sure. So entrepreneurship, as you mentioned, especially when you have a small group of founders, or even in the very beginning, you could go years with just a few employees. Time is your most valuable resource. So I just want to emphasize what you're saying, which is when you're trying to maximize your time, efficiency, productivity, all the different tricks and hacks that people try to look up, how do I squeeze more out of my hours so that I can be more productive? Because that's really critical to get a business going. And like you mentioned, there are a lot of variation in how people become productive and people with different goals and different lifestyles, different means of working. But underneath that, there's principles of process science that help say universally what helps make people more efficient. How do you actually get the most out of your hours? And one that I share with entrepreneurs a lot is this idea of doing what you want to be doing in any given moment as a means of maximizing productivity is one that I coach a lot.
Yeah.
And that may seem pithy in a way, like, oh, do what you want. But the idea is that you can set goals and you can set objectives. But in a given day, if you have 10 hours, if you've ever been the kind of person that says, I need to get this done today, but you don't want to do it, and you spend 5 hours building up momentum, crashing through obstacles, and forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do in that moment in time, that's where you lose a lot of productivity, especially as an entrepreneur, because you're so goal-oriented.
Yeah.
A lot of the times as an entrepreneur, you have a million tasks at any given time. So even if you wanted to do A, B, and C today, if you wake up and you don't want to do A, B, and C today, leave it and do D, E, and F today. This kind of idea that you have to be in the present moment as an entrepreneur to maximize your productivity, it's one of the core productivity tips that I give people, because ultimately the better processes are ones that has more energy going through them. So you always are trying to unblock your own energy flow, which means being in touch and looking at what you want to be doing against what you actually need to be doing and trying to align those things as much as possible.
Man, I like this so much because you might be in a mood to do one thing one day versus the another thing another day, right? So making sure that you're aligned with how your body is responding to how your business is asking of you. That's not just interesting, that's very natural to do as well.
But also, it's the basic practice that helps you understand your own instincts, especially in entrepreneurship. There is no straight line. A lot of times, if you're feeling today, I don't want to do this set of tasks, it might be because you're unsubconsciously processing it's not the right opportunity, it's not the right time to do that, either because maybe an email exchange you had yesterday, or because the resources aren't in place. Maybe the market's high, maybe the market's low. A lot of these things can change minute to minute, and being adaptable and being flexible and listening to your instincts is what makes you more productive. Because trying to push through resistance, a lot of people tell entrepreneurs that success is through perseverance, and it's through pushing through when you feel low or when you feel down. But ultimately, the people who are most passionate and most productive are the ones that know in this moment, I don't feel like doing this, so I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do this where I have more energy. And then whatever that thing is, they get a huge boost and they can knock right through it because they're engaged, they're excited, they want to do it. They're not trying to push through all those boundaries. Because if there is something that's preventing you or resisting, just listen to that. Don't try to push through it a lot of the time. That's how you maximize productivity, which is always engaging thing that make you excited.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think what you're talking about here is being more conscious as an entrepreneur, being more conscious as a person, being more aware. And that's something Gary Vee talks about all the time. Being aware of who you are, being aware of your happiness, being aware of where your mindset is, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to live with all of the things that you're doing. So it's better that you're happier at the end of the day so that you're more inclined to do the right things the next day. And I think you talk very deeply about it in your book, Becoming a Conscious Business, Introspection and Enlightenment. Can you explore how more of this stuff contributes to business success?
Yeah, absolutely. And you basically started to say it, which is consciousness and being more present and being more self-aware. It's not some nice to have that just helps your mental health. It actually is also the intersection of productive and efficient processes. It's how most efficient processes in nature work. And the point there is, if you are, let's say, a squirrel, for instance, or you could pick any animal, the squirrel doesn't try to spend a lot of time anticipating what's going to happen next week or next month. It doesn't set up a 5-year business strategy. It doesn't set up a 10-year business strategy. It's in the moment and reacting to the moment. And because of that, it's always very quick in terms of, okay, weather's changing, there's predator coming, whatever it is. Animals live in that moment. And because of that, they're not wasting a lot of energy planning for things that actually maybe not come to pass. And sometimes in human life, we can't be that present because we're coordinating people's schedules and we're doing all these other things in the business world. But generally, the less you plan and the more you're open to seizing opportunity, not only in your own network, but also just in the market more broadly, you're going to be able to have that surges of energy, finding opportunity, becoming more productive. That's how companies strive to be more adaptable, strive to be sustainable. It's not through better planning. It's through better awareness and conscious movement on opportunity as it appears in the present moment.
Man, I love that so much, because a lot of people just keep thinking about, hey, this is what I'm going to do, as opposed to this is what I'm going to do today versus this is what I'm going to do next week or next year. It's good to plan ahead of time, yes, but you also need to make sure that, hey, you're paying attention to the present. I love that philosophy. Yeah. Thanks so much.
And it's also, planning is an act of thinking. And if you zoom out on yourself when you're thinking, usually if you're actually engaged in thinking, you're just sitting and you're not doing anything physically. You're not building, you're not producing. So if you want to talk about efficiency and process, it's always trying to favor producing, creating, building assets, investing in tangible things, because that's how things grow. If you have a business plan in front of you, you can think about the business plan for 6 hours, but if you don't write anything, you've created nothing. Whereas if you just write business plan on the top and every 10 minutes you feel like putting another thought on there, you're building something that's growing. So it's always this idea, be engaged in something that's in creating something in the world. And that's that presence, right? The less time you spend thinking and planning, the more things get built and the more of your energy gets translated into something real. And that's how you build momentum in business and in your personal life.
I love that so much, because very recently I was watching this video. It was, what's her name? Damn, I can't remember. But she was saying that to minimize the time from thinking to action, the smaller time you spend from thinking an ideation to actually taking an action on it, the better you train yourself to not complicate things, to not contemplate, to not think about all the bad things that are going to happen, because you've taken action, you got feedback if this worked or not worked, and then now you can make changes and do it over again.
That's exactly it. That's the mechanic we're talking about, which is you want to do more and think less. And that's actually another way to say being more present, because when you watch animals, when you watch systems that are more present, they're taking in information and they're reacting with quicker and quicker frequency. And like you said, they're not taking in 10 hours worth of data and then making a decision what to do next. They take a minute of data and act. They take a minute of data and act. It's that fundamentally that creates for efficient process that's always moving. And like you said, if you're moving more frequently, you can always pivot. It doesn't matter if you make 10 wrong steps
That's right.
to take one right step. It doesn't matter, because if you wait 30 steps and to act, you're still going to end up way faster to where you're trying to go. It's this iterative mentality that keeps us present.
Man, that's so powerful, because as I'm thinking about things, I'm raising a 1-year-old, right? So when he's crying, our action is to take care of why he's crying. Either he's hungry, he needs a diaper change, or he needs something else, like he needs to go to sleep. So you understand that over time. And then the shorter the time is of you responding to what he wants, the more calm there is in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is in general, we live in a time where the analysis paralysis is one of the biggest killers of process. And it's also, again, it's the biggest killer of presence. And that's why in this conversation, hopefully it's becoming more, and this is the whole point of, like you mentioned, my book, Becoming a Conscious Business. Becoming a conscious person drives you to join organizations to build complexity. We become more conscious as people, then we become more conscious businesses. We just start to cultivate this mentality of conscious action, deliberate action, and more action. And then it creates more productivity in the world at large, more calm, more peace, because people are at peace when we're creating. At least, not to get too far into my philosophical bend, but the more time you spend creating something, especially things that you like creating, the more happiness you bring into the world, and the less stress and anxiety and all the different things that we try to avoid.
I love that so much, because anytime my daughter is quiet, I know she's working on something, and we'll go check the library. Oh my God, there's all these papers, and she's drawn something, or she's made a book. Like anytime there's quiet, there's something happening that we got to make sure that it's not going in the wrong direction. So I love that a lot analysis from another perspective. Talk to me about the Trueville mapping language and how TML and other innovations can be applied in various business contexts and becoming highly efficient and beneficial for entrepreneur listeners.
Sure. So the Trueville mapping language is a process mapping language that we created at Trueville. So Trueville is a company, so it's our mapping language that we created. And what we do at Trueville is we try to give people empowerment and better tools so that they can understand process and articulate their own process, and also articulate their business processes. Because in general, it is very hard to work with a process if you can't see it and you can't communicate what it is. So the Trueville mapping language was created to be a common sense, intuitive process language that people could adopt very easily and start to write down their processes and be able to talk about their processes. And that's really what it is. And just to give one more point of reference, most process mapping softwares, and any entrepreneur out there who's been challenged to map their process, explain their process to another company, explain it to another person, explain it to a new employee, they know the challenge of writing it down. And if you pull up all the other tools out there, Visio, Lucid Charts, Mural, you name it, Miro, it's all blank pages. And you can create process diagrams. You can start to map out what you want to say, but you've got to create your own language every time. And nobody else will know the language you create, the different shapes you use, the colors you use, the type of data, the detail level of data that you try to put in there. It's basically everyone is recreating process language every time they do an exercise. At Trueville, we're giving you the language, we're giving you a standard, we're trying to make it easy to understand, relatable, and we're loading it into a tool with an opinion. So when you turn on the Trueville tool, you're not creating from scratch your own interpretation of process from a blank page. You've got the structure there. It asks you for the type of input that will make a good process diagram. And then you can start to communicate and work and compare your process data with other people's process data. And I think for businesses, it's fundamental. It's fundamental to understand your process so that you can do all the things you want to do, the sexy stuff like automation, artificial intelligence, bringing in new technology. All that relies on the basics of you understanding and being able to speak your process. So at Trueville, we're just trying to make that easier for you.
And that's so powerful. How does Trueville mapping language compare to UML, or the universal mapping language?
Sure. So UML was designed by engineers and it was meant for developers. So it was a development-centric language. Because you could also say there's BPMN, business process management notation. That's another engineering centric language that has
Sure.
hundreds of shapes and conventions that is used for workflow configuration. So these are competitive languages to the Truefit mapping language. And if you say, what's the difference? A lot of the biggest difference is they're usually very fit for their own use cases, but they have very high learning curves. Often you have to buy a book or take a course. You have to study to learn UML. You have to study
Sure.
to learn BPMN. It's not something that if I made you a UML map, if we're just off the street, you could say, oh, this makes total sense to me. I know what all these shapes are. I know what all these conventions are. And therefore, it makes it less shareable. It makes it less accessible. So the Truefit mapping language is truly a alternative to that, which is just a lower learning curve. There's not many conventions, and it's really trying to write it in a human-centric language, the one that everyone's already knows. So you're not spending a lot of waste of time interpreting back and forth to each other.
Dude, this is really interesting and very, not just interesting, it's in the time of where I am thinking of creating much more simplified processes for, let's say, my podcast, let's say my video production, let's say my home studio setup, like all of the different things that I do, website management, CRM configuration, like all of these things. There's a ton of things that we all work with as businesses and need. This is a really cool intersection, right? Of me going through needing something and then you showing up and talking about this new mapping language. So really can't wait to start using the Truefit mapping language for my own processes, because as I'm talking to my developers, as I'm talking to my business partners, as I'm talking to other people that understand the importance of processes, the importance of systems. And I think this is really powerful. I can't wait to try it out.
Yeah, I'd love for you to try it. And anyone who's interested in trying it, the tool is live now. We just released, actually. And
Nice.
if you're interested in it, you can get onto truefit.com and you can check it out, because there's at least a room there for a free process to try. And yeah, write it out. And like you said, anyone in any entrepreneur, really, if you're trying to communicate, like you said, with developers, anyone, it's very difficult if somebody says, well, what is the process of setting up a podcast? What is the process of doing this or that? How do you usually communicate it? It's a huge gap. You can write it down in an email. You can write it down in a Word document, Excel. Those are very hard to follow. The best way is to write a process map, and a process map that other people can read intuitively.
Yeah, and I've done all of the things that you mentioned before. Write it as a little post, write it as a little document, write it as a mind map tool. Hey, this is what a mind map for it process, but it doesn't really convey all of the things unless they understand and read the details inside each of the things. Oh, this is what's happening. Oh, this is what's happening. Because the better our processes are, the better it is for the future. And especially in this age where AI, it's been over a year that ChatGPT was introduced to the world. And there's 100 million people using it. Every single application that you think about has AI built into it. And I think having a better process management for your system is going to be really great for the future. So what is something that you're looking in the future trends in business process management improvements?
Yeah. So to me, future trends wise, process work is quickly becoming one of the most critical domain functions that an organization or a small business or an entrepreneur can have. And it's because of what you just talked about, which is if you want to be competitive and you want to stay relevant, you have to have a high level of technology integration, whether it's ChatGPT or any of the automation or machine learning or SaaS products that are out there that are best in class. The only way you can set them up effectively in your business is if you are able to understand your own process and translate that process into new tools. Because if you think you have a sloppy underlying process and people are acting however they want, you can add technology on top of it to fix that. Most organizations find out the hard way that just does not work. So the organizations that are going to be successful in integrating technology and moving into the future are going to be the ones that have more process acumen, the ability to articulate a process, to analyze it, to redesign it to be more efficient. Because if you can understand what your people are supposed to be doing, you understand the underlying workflow you're trying to accomplish for your customers, then technology enables faster and better. It doesn't fix your problems for you. So I think this understanding of this conversation that we're having and knowing that you need the process tools, you need to be able to map process, you need to be able to manage your process over time is so critical. I think more and more people are going to be understanding that in the next few years. And already from my seat in the marketplace, it's already becoming a huge conversation everywhere, because I'll tell you, people are still, in the last 10 years, people are still buying the software and realizing they don't know what to do with it. And this is just systemic.
Because they think buying the software or buying the hardware or buying the thing is going to get them there, but don't realize that it's the knowledge behind using that device is going to make sense. It's almost like you're buying a motorcycle without learning how to drive it.
Right. Or it's if you had a horse and buggy and then you replaced it with a car, but when you have the car and the worker asks, where am I supposed to go? You don't know the route. You don't know where the horse was going. You don't know where he was delivering to.
Right.
No matter that you have the car if nobody knows what to do with it.
Amen. 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 I would love for you to share some tips or strategies for entrepreneurs coming up. But before we do that, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, you'll have 3 tips or strategies to share for our entrepreneurs listeners that are just starting out into understanding what business process management does.
Are you ready to amplify your business? SPI Pro is your gateway to elevate your entrepreneurial journey, offering cutting-edge education, immersive training, and interactive collaborations. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro, SPI Pro is the community for you, providing you access to professional networking and advice to accelerate your growth. To join, head on over to hacksandhobbies.com/SPI Pro. Join SPI Pro and transform your unique journey into a success story. Again, head on over to hacksandhobbies.com/SPI Pro.
Hey guys, welcome back. We've been talking with Sam here from Truefit, and the conversation has been not just philosophical, but very practical as well, because as businesses, as entrepreneurs, we're always looking to be efficient in our workflow, be efficient in how we are mapping our days so that we're delivering more, we're providing more of our time and our wisdom and our services to our customers. So tips for strategies for entrepreneurs. You've got 3 of them. Let's hear them.
Sure. So the first one, unsurprisingly from the conversation so far, is write down your processes. That's the first tip. And you don't even have to have an objective, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You may think you know what you're doing and you think you know your process, but until you're able to write it down and look at it outside of your head, there's a tremendous amount of insight that you'll generate from doing the exercise. So before you try to scale, before you try to buy that next tool, before you try to hire that next person, write down your processes. I guarantee it will be fruitful exercise no matter what you're trying to accomplish. So that's definitely number 1. Number 2, I would say always look to maximize the resources you have now before you expand resources and expand your cost. So one of the things that I think entrepreneurs, they're really, when they feel a little success, they're always quick to try to expand their operating model. But the one thing I always suggest as an overarching tip is make sure you're using process improvement and maximizing the resources you have before you expand any resources, if they're human resource or technology. Because if you think about it in terms of utilization, let's say you're doing really great right now and you're only utilizing all of your resources at 70% efficiency. That means for every new resource you hire, you're scaling 30% waste essentially in your operating model. And that always catches up to people. And the third one, which I think is more practical and also a bit of a repeat from earlier, which is make sure you're always aligning your activities with activities you like. It's the only way to actually truly sustain a business. The more you let tasks, activities, and things become drudgerous or things you don't like doing, the quicker you're going to experience burnout and eventual business failure. So the only way to have a sustainable business is to make sure that you enjoy all the work you do. And keeping your work enjoyable means delegating, finding partners when you have to make sure that you're pushing work you don't like to do off your plate. But if you can't maintain that joy and that excitement and that energy for doing your work, then you will become a slave to your business. So that's probably my last big tip.
Those were amazing steps. Number 1, write down the process. Make sure that you understand what your business is doing. Eliminate the waste, and then have the ways to, what's the third one?
Make sure you're staying aligned with your interests and your passions. Make sure you enjoy the work that you assigned to yourself.
And making sure that you enjoy the work you assign yourself to do and others. Find people that enjoy to do the work that you don't want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the real key to delegation, which is if you find work that you don't like doing, that's a good sign that you need to delegate. Because if you don't, you can think, oh, save money or I'll be more efficient keeping everything on, but your productivity will slowly dwindle to nothing if you wake up every day and you have too many things that you have to do that you do not like doing.
Yeah, man, I love that. All right, let's jump into the rapid fire question that I love to do. Number one, what is the one hobby that you wish you got into?
For me, it's piano playing, because I really wish I could read treble and bass clef and play an instrument that I could just enjoy by myself. I think that would be therapeutic, but I can't play piano, so I'm sad that I didn't learn that earlier.
A growth mindset would say, hey, what does it take for me to learn how to play piano? And what's funny is we were at the conference a couple of months ago, and in this one room, there was this large piano, and it was like a dull time. I was like, I wonder how to play the piano. And I found this app called Player Piano, and it basically tells you, hey, these are the different chords, and when you press this button, this is what the sound that it should come. So then the app was training me and telling me, oh, you're pressing the right buttons. Now press this button, or now press this key. It was really cool. Like, I learned really quickly the different notes and different things that a piano would do.
That's great. Yeah, it's never too late to learn. I just need to now create priority for it against all the other things I like doing.
Amen. Amen. All right, next up, what did you want to be when you were a child?
So when I was a child, I very solidly wanted to be a clerk at People's, now CVS company. So my parents always said that was my lifelong dream, to be a cashier, essentially. I missed the mark on that one, but
yeah,
maybe one day I'll go back and I'll become a cashier.
Nice. I love it. Next up, what is your favorite movie or TV show?
So my favorite movie is The Nightmare Before Christmas by Tim Burton. And I don't know, that one has just always stuck with me. I like this sort of macabre atmosphere and the different musical aspects. Danny Elfman's a genius, so that one always sticks with me. Timeless.
Nice. It is timeless for sure. And just the right timing as well. We have Christmas just around the corner. All right, next up, what movie would you choose if you got to play a character in it?
Oh, what movie would I choose to be in if I got to play a character? That's an interesting one. I would probably want to be in The Matrix, because I do feel a lot of alignment, especially in the current times, of being able to help people break away from societal constraints and being a person who can help people see a different way of living. That really appeals to me. And that theme comes up often in my work and in my life.
I love it, man. That's definitely an amazing movie. I always refer back to it all the time because it's so powerful and showing people that you don't have to be stuck in the system to elevate from it. All right, next up, who is your favorite superhero?
My favorite superhero, I've been made fun of this a lot because it's lame, but it's actually Aquaman, because I think the ability to talk to fish is really neat, and also swim anywhere in the ocean. It's just such a vast area. So it's fascinating.
No, it's not just fascinating, but it also talks to how deep you can go in a conversation, right? If you think about the depth of the oceans is deeper than the highest of the mountains that we have in the world. So it's important to know that, yes, Aquaman can talk to fish, but he can also go to the depths of any conversation without fail.
I like that interpretation. That's better feedback than I've had from other comic book enthusiasts.
I love it. All right, next up, and the last question. If you were a board game, what would it be?
If I was a board game, I would be Wingspan, which is my favorite board game at the moment. It's just a game about playing birds and habitats with different abilities. Also might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I've played for hundreds of hours, and if I was turned into a board game, it'd be that one, because it's just relaxing, it's competitive, it's engaging, and it's always different. So it plays to my personality.
Very cool. All right, man. Last up, where can entrepreneurs, superpreneurs listening find you?
Absolutely. So the easiest way to get me is on LinkedIn. I'm the only Sam Dryshak, basically online. But if you want to reach out to me directly, I'd also love to hear from you at sam@truval.com. And if you want to bypass me and just check out what Truval's doing, if you just go to truval.com, you can just sign up to our newsletter. You can start to engage with our product that just released. And those are the easiest channels to get me.
Awesome, man. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your mindset, and your passion in the power of process improvement, because the better process that we have, the better we are living in our present.
Absolutely.
thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, and till the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Hacks and Hobbies. You can find additional information on the guest today on their website, hacksandhobbies.com. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on upcoming interviews with amazing guests.